Many people live in a world where sharing everything has become normal. Whether through conversations, social media, or even in private moments, there is a pressure to let people know what we are going through, what we are planning, or what we desire. But have you ever stopped to consider that not everything needs to be shared? Have you ever thought about how much trouble could be avoided if we simply learned to guard our words? The Bible is filled with wisdom about the power of silence, the importance of discretion, and the need for wisdom in our relationships. In the story of Joseph, we see a young man with dreams given by God, but his mistake was sharing them with the wrong people, his own brothers. Instead of supporting him, they became envious and plotted against him. Not everyone who listens to you wants the best for you. Some people are simply gathering information, waiting for an opportunity to use your words against you. This is why it is important to have discernment in what we share and with whom we share it. Jesus himself demonstrated this wisdom. There were times when he spoke openly, and there were times when he remained silent. Before Pilate, when false accusations were thrown at him, he did not feel the need to defend himself. He knew that the truth did not need constant explanation. His life spoke louder than any words ever could. How often do we waste time trying to explain ourselves to people who have already made up their minds about us? How often do we give away too much information only to regret it later? Many times the desire to share too much comes from a need for validation. We want people to understand us, to support us, to approve of us. But the Bible reminds us in Galatians 1:10 that if we seek to please people, we are not truly serving Christ. Our worth is not found in how many people know our struggles, it is found in God alone. There is freedom in letting go of the need to explain everything. There is peace in knowing that God sees and understands even when people do not. True wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to be silent. Some things are meant to be kept between you and God. Not everyone deserves access to your heart, your dreams, or your struggles. Even Jesus had an inner circle. He did not reveal everything to everyone. This is not about being secretive, but about being wise. A wise person speaks with purpose. A wise person guards their heart. A wise person knows that silence can sometimes be more powerful than words. Let your actions speak for you. Let your life be a testimony without the need for constant explanation. Speak when it is necessary and trust God with the rest. May He give us the wisdom to guard our hearts, the strength to resist the need for validation, and the discernment to know when to speak and when to be silent. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This verse carries a deep and powerful truth that many overlook. The heart is the center of our thoughts, emotions, and decisions. It is the place where our deepest desires and motivations are formed. If we are not careful with what we allow into our hearts and what we allow out, we can end up in situations that harm us spiritually, emotionally, and even physically. Many people fail to understand that not everyone around them should have access to their hearts. Not every person is meant to know the details of their struggles, dreams, or plans. When we open our hearts to the wrong people, we expose ourselves to unnecessary pain, betrayal, and disappointment. In today's world, people are quick to share their thoughts and emotions without considering the consequences. Social media has created a culture where people feel the need to express everything they feel, think, or experience. But the Bible warns against this kind of openness without wisdom. In Matthew 7:6, Jesus says, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." This is a strong statement that reveals a simple truth. Not everyone will value what you share. Some people will take your words, your struggles, and your dreams and use them against you. This is why we must learn to guard our hearts and be selective with what we reveal. Many times people share their struggles because they seek comfort or validation from others. It is natural to want encouragement, but not every listening ear is a supportive one. Some people only listen so they can spread gossip. Others listen to find your weaknesses. Judas was one of the 12 disciples walking closely with Jesus, seeing his miracles and hearing his teachings. Yet in the end, he betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. If Jesus himself had someone close to him who was capable of betrayal, how much more should we be careful with the people we allow into our lives? We must understand that not everyone who appears to be for us is truly with us. This is why prayer and discernment are necessary when deciding whom to trust. Guarding your heart is not just about protecting yourself from others, but also about protecting yourself from your own emotions. There are times when our emotions can lead us to speak out of frustration, anger, or fear. When we are hurt, we may want to vent to others, but if we do so without wisdom, we may regret our words later. James 1:19 reminds us, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. This means that sometimes the best thing we can do is remain silent and take our concerns to God. He is the only one who truly understands our hearts, and He is the only one who can guide us in how to handle. Some people believe that being open with everyone makes them more authentic, but true authenticity does not mean exposing every detail of your life. Jesus was authentic, yet He did not reveal everything to everyone. He spoke in parables to the crowds, but He explained the deeper meanings only to His disciples. Even among the disciples, He had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John, who witnessed moments that others did not. This shows us that wisdom is found in knowing how to guard our hearts and choosing carefully who has access to certain parts of our lives. Another reason to guard your heart is to protect your faith. If you constantly share your struggles with the wrong people, they can plant seeds of doubt, discouragement, and fear in your mind. Instead of receiving godly counsel, you may receive advice that leads you away from God's will. Psalm 1:1 warns us, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers." The voices you listen to have power over your thoughts and decisions. If you allow too many voices into your heart, you may become confused and distracted from what God is calling you to do. A guarded heart does not mean a cold heart. It does not mean shutting people out completely. It means having the wisdom to know when to speak and when to remain silent. It means knowing when to seek counsel and when to take matters to God in prayer. It means understanding that not everyone deserves access to your deepest thoughts and emotions. Those who guard their hearts walk in peace because they are not constantly battling unnecessary conflicts, misunderstandings, and betrayals. They are able to focus on God's purpose for their lives without being weighed down by the opinions and judgments of others. There is power in silence. There is wisdom in restraint. There is protection in keeping certain things between you and God. The power of silence is something many people fail to understand. In a world where everyone feels the need to express their opinions, defend themselves, or constantly share what is on their minds, silence has become rare. But silence is not weakness. In fact, silence can be one of the most powerful tools a person can use. It can protect, strengthen, and guide us in ways that speaking never could. The Bible shows us that silence, when used wisely, is a sign of spiritual maturity and wisdom. Jesus Himself demonstrated the power of silence many times. One of the most striking examples is when He stood before Pilate. The religious leaders had accused Him of many things, and Pilate asked Him if He had anything to say in His defense. But Jesus remained silent. He did not argue. He did not try to explain Himself or convince them of His innocence. He knew the truth did not need constant explanation. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. It showed confidence in the will of God. Sometimes the best response to false accusations, gossip, or misunderstandings is silence. When we try to explain ourselves to people who have already made up their minds, we waste our energy. True wisdom understands that not every situation requires a response. Many times people speak too much because they feel the need to be heard. They want validation. They want others to understand their side. But the Bible warns us about talking too much. Proverbs 10:19 says, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent." This means the more we talk, the more likely we are to say something we will regret. Words spoken in frustration, anger, or impatience can cause harm that cannot be undone. Once something is said, it cannot be taken back. This is why silence in many situations is a sign of wisdom. It allows us to think before we speak. It gives us time to seek God's guidance before responding. Silence is also a form of protection. There are times when people ask questions not because they care, because they are looking for information to use against us. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, his enemies tried to distract him. They sent messages trying to engage him in conversation, but he refused to stop the work and talk to them. He understood that some conversations are simply distractions. Not everyone who wants to talk to you has good intentions. Some people only want to know your business so they can gossip about it later. This is why it is important to be discerning about when to speak and when to remain silent. Another example of the power of silence is found in the book of Job. When Job lost everything, his wealth, his children, his health, his friends came to visit him. At first they did the right thing. They sat with him in silence for 7 days. This silence was comforting, but when they started speaking, they began to accuse Job of wrongdoing. Their words brought more pain than healing. This shows that sometimes the best way to comfort someone is through silence. Not every situation needs words. Sometimes being present and listening is more powerful than anything we could say. Silence also strengthens our relationship with God. When we are constantly talking, we may not be listening to what God is trying to tell us. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Being still means quieting our hearts and minds before God. It means not rushing to speak, but waiting to hear His voice. When people struggle with making the right decisions because they do not take time to be silent before God. They pray, but they do not pause to listen. They ask for guidance, but they do not wait for His direction. Learning to be silent in God's presence allows us to receive His wisdom, peace, and instruction. Another reason to practice silence is that it builds self-control. James 3:2 says, "If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." This means that if we can control our tongues, we can control other areas of our lives. Many problems come from speaking too quickly, arguments, broken relationships, misunderstandings. But a person who has learned the power of silence knows when to walk away from a conversation, when to hold back words, and when to speak only after careful thought. This kind of self-control is a mark of maturity. Sometimes silence is necessary to allow God to fight our battles. Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." There are situations where we feel the need to defend ourselves, to explain, or to argue. When God calls us to be still and trust Him. When people speak against us, when they try to bring us down with their words, our first instinct may be to respond. But silence can be the most powerful response. It shows that we trust God more than the opinions of others. Practicing silence does not mean never speaking. It means choosing words carefully, knowing when to remain quiet, and understanding that not everything needs a response. It means listening more and speaking less. It means being aware that words have power and should not be used carelessly. It means trusting that sometimes God speaks louder through our silence than through anything we could say. Many people go through life seeking approval from others without realizing the dangers that come with it. The need for validation can lead to oversharing, compromising values, and even changing one's identity to fit in. But the Bible makes it clear that our focus should not be on pleasing people, but on pleasing God. When we live for the approval of others, we become slaves to their opinions. We begin to shape our words, actions, and decisions based on what others think rather than what God desires. This is why it is crucial to break free from the need for human approval and find our identity in Christ alone. One of the clearest warnings about seeking approval from people in Galatians 1:10, which says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." This verse reminds us that pleasing people and serving Christ often do not go together. The world has different standards than God. If we try to gain the approval of the world, we will find ourselves compromising our faith, making decisions that go against biblical principles, and struggling with constant disappointment because people's opinions are always changing. The danger of seeking approval is that it makes us vulnerable to manipulation. When someone knows you crave their validation, they can control you. They can pressure you into doing things you wouldn't normally do. This is why many people struggle to say no even when they should. They fear rejection. They fear disappointing others. But Jesus never lived for people's approval. He was not afraid to be misunderstood, rejected, or criticized. In John 6, after Jesus taught a hard truth, many of His followers left Him. But He did not chase after them. He did not try to explain Himself or make His message more acceptable. He remained faithful to His purpose, knowing that only those truly seeking God would understand. Another example is found in the story of King Saul. In 1 Samuel 15, God commanded Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites, but Saul disobeyed. Instead of following God's instructions fully, he spared some of the best livestock and even kept the enemy king alive. When the prophet Samuel confronted him, Saul admitted that he disobeyed because he was afraid of the people and wanted to please them. His need for human approval cost him his kingdom. This is a serious warning for us today. When we put people's opinions above God's commands, we will always suffer the consequences. The fear of people can lead us away from obedience to God. Seeking approval can also rob us of peace. When you live for the opinions of others, you will always feel anxious. You will always be trying to meet their expectations, which are constantly changing. One day they like you, the next day they don't. One day they praise you, the next day they criticize you. Living this way is exhausting. But when you live to please God, you find peace. God's expectations do not change. His love is constant. His truth remains the same. Instead of running after people's approval, we should focus on doing what is right in God's eyes. Jesus warned against seeking human praise in Matthew 6:1, saying, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." This means that when we do good things, we should not do them for attention or approval. Some people only give, serve, or pray when others are watching. Their goal is not to glorify God, but to be recognized. But Jesus teaches that true faithfulness happens in secret. God sees what is done in private and rewards those who serve Him sincerely. If we are constantly looking for human recognition, we may receive temporary praise, but we lose the eternal reward that comes from God. Another problem with seeking approval is that it can lead to hypocrisy. In an effort to fit in, many people pretend to be something they are not. They act differently depending on who they are around. They compromise their faith in certain environments to avoid criticism. But Jesus calls us to be the same person in private as we are in public. In Matthew 23:27, He rebuked the Pharisees, saying, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean." The Pharisees cared more about appearances than true righteousness. They wanted people to see them as holy, but their hearts were far from God. When we live for people's approval, we can fall into the same trap, focusing on outward appearances rather than inward transformation. Breaking free from the need for approval requires a shift in focus. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" we must ask, "What does God think?" Instead of seeking validation from others, we must seek God's truth. When we truly understand that our worth comes from Him, we no longer need people's praise. We become confident in who we are in Christ. We become bold in our faith, unafraid of rejection or criticism. This is the kind of freedom God wants for His children. Living for God's approval does not mean we should ignore wise counsel or reject correction. There is a difference between seeking godly advice and craving human validation. The Bible teaches us to listen to wise instruction, but it also warns us not to depend on people's approval for our self-worth. Proverbs 29:25 says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." When we put our trust in God, we are secure. We no longer feel the need to impress others. We no longer feel controlled by their opinions. We walk in confidence, knowing that we are fully accepted and loved by God. Trust is a precious gift, and who we give it to can shape our lives in profound ways. The Bible teaches us to be wise in whom we trust, warning us that not everyone has our best interests at heart. Many people have suffered betrayal, disappointment, and heartbreak because they placed their trust in the wrong hands. This is why it is important to be discerning about who we confide in and what we share. While relationships are built on trust, not everyone is meant to know the deepest parts of our hearts. One of the clearest examples of misplaced trust in the Bible is the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson was a man chosen by God, set apart with incredible strength to lead Israel. But despite his calling, he had a weakness. He trusted the wrong person. Delilah was not on his side. She was working with the Philistines to destroy him. Yet, he ignored the warning signs and kept sharing his secrets with her. Eventually, he revealed the source of his strength, and it led to his downfall. This story serves as a powerful reminder that not everyone who appears close to us truly has our best interests at heart. Some people only want to get close to us for their own benefit. Many people fall into the trap of trusting too quickly because they assume others think and act as they do. They assume that because they are honest, others will be honest with them. But the Bible warns us about human nature. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" This does not mean we should be paranoid or live in fear, but it does mean we should be cautious. We should not be quick to trust just because someone is friendly or appears kind. True trust is built over time through consistent actions, not just words. Jesus himself demonstrated wisdom and trust. Though he loved everyone, he did not entrust himself to everyone. John 2:24-25 says, "But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Jesus understood human nature. He knew that people could be fickle, praising him one day and turning against him the next. The same crowd that shouted Hosanna as he entered Jerusalem later cried out, "Crucify him." This shows us that we should not base our trust on emotions or temporary actions. Just because someone is with you in good times does not mean they will stand with you in difficult times. Another reason to be careful with trust is that not everyone can handle what you share. Some people cannot keep confidence. Proverbs 11:13 says, "A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret." If a person frequently shares other people's private matters with you, it is likely that they will do the same with your secrets. Some people are simply not capable of carrying the weight of certain information. They may spread it out of carelessness, pride, or even jealousy. This is why we must test the character of a person before entrusting them with our struggles, dreams, or weaknesses. Trusting the wrong people can also lead to unnecessary battles. There are people who pretend to support you but secretly envy you. They may listen to your plans not to encourage you, but to find ways to compete with you or sabotage you. This is why discretion is so important. Not everyone needs to know what God is doing in your life. Some things should be kept between you and Him until the right time. Joseph in the Bible learned this lesson the hard way. God gave him dreams of greatness, but when he shared them with his brothers, they became jealous and sold him into slavery. If he had remained quiet, he might have avoided their hatred. This does not mean we should never share our dreams, but it does mean we should seek God's wisdom before doing so. Building wise trust also means observing people's actions over time. Proverbs 26 says, "Many claim to have unfailing love, but a faithful person who can find." Words are easy to say, but true character is revealed through actions. A trustworthy person is consistent. They are the same whether in public or private. They do not change depending on who they are with. Before you trust someone deeply, observe how they handle responsibility, how they speak about others, and how they respond in difficult situations. Trust should not be given based on feelings alone, but on proven character. One of the most important aspects of trust is understanding that our ultimate trust should be in God, not people. Psalm 118:8 says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans." People, no matter how good they are, can fail us. They can make mistakes, misunderstand us, or let us down unintentionally. But God never fails. When we place our trust in Him first, we are not shaken when people disappoint us. We understand that He is our source of strength, wisdom, and security. Trusting wisely does not mean shutting people out completely. It means being discerning about who we allow into our inner circle. Jesus had many followers, but He had only 12 disciples. Among the 12, He had an even closer group, Peter, James, and John, who witnessed special moments that others did not. This teaches us that while we should love and be kind to all, we should be selective about who has access to the deepest parts of our hearts. When we trust wisely, we protect ourselves from unnecessary pain and betrayal. We avoid the trap of giving our hearts to people who are not ready to handle them. We learn to wait on God to reveal the right people at the right time. We develop stronger, healthier relationships built on true loyalty and faithfulness. And most importantly, we place our trust in the one who never fails, God Himself. The words we speak and the information we share can shape our future in ways we often do not realize. The Bible teaches us to be mindful of what we say, warning that words have the power to bring life or destruction. In a world where people openly share their thoughts, plans, and struggles without considering the consequences, there is wisdom in knowing what to say and what to keep private. Not everything needs to be spoken, and not everyone needs to know what is in our hearts. One of the greatest dangers of sharing too much is that words can be used against us. Many people have suffered unnecessary pain because they revealed their thoughts to the wrong person. Proverbs 13:3 says, "Those who guard their lips preserve their lives, but those who speak rashly will come to ruin." This verse reminds us that speaking carelessly can lead to destruction. When we share personal details with people who do not have pure intentions, we open the door for betrayal, gossip, and misunderstanding. Some people listen not to support or encourage, but to gather information for their own benefit. A clear biblical example of this is King Hezekiah. In 2 Kings 20, envoys from Babylon visited Hezekiah, and he foolishly showed them all the treasures of his kingdom, his silver, gold, spices, and valuable possessions. He did not realize that by revealing everything, he was exposing his kingdom to future attack. The prophet Isaiah later told him that because of his mistake, the Babylonians would one day come and take away all those treasures. This teaches an important lesson. Not everything needs to be shared, even with people who seem friendly. Some details are better kept private because revealing too much can bring consequences in the future. Oversharing can also weaken our ability to move forward in life. There are times when God gives us a vision, a goal, or a dream that is meant to be developed in private. When we speak too soon, we risk facing unnecessary opposition. Nehemiah understood this well. When God placed a burden on his heart to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he did not immediately tell everyone. Nehemiah 2:12 says, "I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem." He kept his plans private until the right time. If he had spoken too early, he might have faced more resistance, discouragement, or even sabotage. This shows that some plans need to be protected until they are strong enough to withstand opposition. Another reason to guard our words is that what we say can impact the spiritual realm. Many people underestimate the power of words. Proverbs 18:21 says, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." This means that our words can shape our reality. When we constantly speak about our fears, weaknesses, or doubts, we strengthen them. But when we speak words of faith, we align ourselves with God's promises. This is why it is important to be careful about who we share our struggles with. Some people may encourage us in faith, but others may increase our doubts and fears. Keeping certain things private also helps us avoid unnecessary judgment. In today's world, where people share everything on social media, many forget that not everyone is supportive. When you openly share your thoughts, struggles, or plans, you invite the opinions of others, some of which may not be constructive. Even Jesus warned about sharing precious things with those who do not appreciate them. In Matthew 7:6, he said, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." This means that some things are too valuable to be shared with just anyone. Our dreams, testimonies, and personal struggles should be handled with wisdom. One of the most dangerous consequences of speaking too much is that words can invite unnecessary battles. Some people do not face certain struggles until they begin speaking about things they should have kept private. The enemy often listens to what we say and uses our own words against us. When we declare our weaknesses, struggles, or frustrations openly, we may unknowingly give the enemy a strategy to attack us. This is why it is important to pray before speaking and ask God for wisdom. James 1:19 advises, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." This verse teaches the importance of pausing before we speak, making sure our words align with God's wisdom. Another example of the dangers of sharing too much is found in the story of Joseph. When Joseph had dreams of greatness, he excitedly shared them with his brothers. Instead of celebrating with him, they became jealous and plotted against him. Although God's plan for Joseph was not stopped, his words led to years of suffering. His story teaches that not everyone is ready to hear what God has placed in your heart. Some people will try to destroy what they do not understand. This is why certain dreams should only be shared with people who have the right heart to receive them. Being cautious with words does not mean we should never speak or share our thoughts. It means that we should use discernment. There is a difference between speaking for wisdom and speaking for attention. Many people share things not because they need help, but because they want validation or recognition. But true wisdom knows when to speak and when to remain silent. Ecclesiastes 3:7 says, "A time to be silent and a time to speak." This means that not every moment is the right moment to reveal what is on our hearts. When we learn to guard our words, we protect ourselves from unnecessary pain. We avoid betrayal, misunderstandings, and conflicts that could have been prevented. We also create space for God to work in our lives without interference. Some blessings need privacy to grow before they are revealed. Just as a seed is buried in the soil before it becomes a tree, some plans and promises need time to develop in secret before they are made public. Choosing our words wisely is an act of maturity. It shows that we understand the power of speech and the importance of timing. It allows us to walk in wisdom, avoid unnecessary struggles, and focus on what truly matters. When we guard our words, we invite God's wisdom into our lives and we position ourselves for His best. The relationships we build and the people we surround ourselves with play a significant role in shaping our lives. The Bible teaches us to be wise about the company we keep, warning that not everyone who is close to us has good intentions. Some people are in our lives for the right reasons, while others may be there for their own benefit. Understanding the difference between true friends and harmful relationships is crucial for spiritual growth, emotional well-being, and fulfilling God's purpose in our lives. One of the greatest dangers of allowing the wrong people too much access to our lives is the influence they can have on us. The Bible warns about this in 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be misled, bad company corrupts good character. No matter how strong we think we are, the people we consistently surround ourselves with will affect our mindset, choices, and even our faith. If we spend time with those who live in a way that dishonors God, we may slowly begin to adopt their attitudes and behaviors, sometimes without even realizing it. This is why we must be intentional about our relationships. In the story of Ammon, the son of King David, we see a tragic example of how the wrong influence can lead to destruction. Ammon had a wicked desire, but he did not act on it until he took the advice of his friend Jonadab, who encouraged him to go forward with his sinful plan. The result was devastating, leading to pain, disgrace, and eventually death in 2 Samuel 13. This story teaches that the people around us can either help us grow in righteousness or push us towards sin. If Ammon had surrounded himself with godly influences instead of a deceptive friend, his story might have ended differently. Some relationships are not just unhelpful, they are dangerous. There are people who disguise themselves as friends but secretly harbor jealousy, resentment, or selfish intentions. The Bible warns about these kinds of people in Proverbs 26:24-26. Enemies disguise themselves with their lips, but in their hearts they harbor deceit. Though their speech is charming, do not believe them, for 7 abominations fill their hearts. Some people will pretend to support you while secretly waiting for an opportunity to harm or betray you. This is why discernment is necessary. We cannot afford to allow just anyone into our inner circle. A powerful example of betrayal is found in the life of Jesus. Among his 12 disciples, there was one who did not truly love him, Judas. Judas walked with Jesus, ate with him, and witnessed his miracles, yet he secretly plotted against him. When the time came, he betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, Matthew 26:14-16. If Jesus himself had a betrayer among his close followers, we should not be surprised when we encounter people who pretend to be for us but do not have our best interests at heart. The key is to ask God for wisdom in identifying such individuals before they have the opportunity to cause harm. Another reason to be careful about relationships is that some people drain our energy, time, and focus without giving anything positive in return. These are the people who always take but never give. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Healthy relationships are meant to build, strengthen, and encourage both individuals. If a relationship is one-sided, where one person is always giving while the other is only taking, it may not be a relationship that God wants us to continue. There is a difference between helping someone in need and allowing ourselves to be used. In addition to identifying negative relationships, we must also recognize the blessing of godly friendships. True friends are those who encourage us in our faith, correct us when we go astray, and stand with us in difficult times. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." These are the kinds of relationships we should cherish. Godly friendships push us closer to Him, challenge us to grow, and remind us of His love. Another key lesson about relationships is knowing when to walk away. There are times when God removes certain people from our lives because they are not part of our future. It is not always easy to let go, especially if we have deep emotional connections. But if someone is pulling us away from God's purpose, it is necessary. In Genesis 13, Abraham and Lot had to separate because their herds had grown too large for the land they shared. Though Lot was family, Abraham knew that staying together would lead to unnecessary conflict. Sometimes separation is necessary for peace and spiritual growth. Jesus also taught about the importance of discerning relationships when he instructed his disciples in Matthew 10:14. "If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet." Not everyone will accept, appreciate, or support what God is doing in our lives. Rather than trying to force relationships that are not meant to be, we should trust God to bring the right people into our lives at the right time. One mistake many people make is assuming that longevity equals loyalty. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they are good for you. Some people were meant to be part of your journey for a season, not a lifetime. Holding on to people who were only meant to be in a certain chapter of your life can delay the blessings that God wants to bring. We must be willing to let go of what is no longer beneficial to embrace what God has prepared for us. At the heart of all relationships should be love, wisdom, and discernment. Love allows us to care for others, wisdom helps us make sound decisions, and discernment helps us recognize who should and should not be in our lives. When we seek God's guidance in our relationships, He will lead us to the right people, those who uplift, encourage, and push us closer to Him. Being careful about relationships is not about being fearful or distrusting everyone. It is about walking in wisdom. Jesus loved everyone, but He was intentional about His closest relationships. He spent the most time with His disciples, and even among them had a smaller circle of Peter, James, and John. This teaches us that it is okay to have boundaries and to be selective about who has access to our hearts. The relationships in our lives should reflect God's purpose for us. When we surround ourselves with godly, wise, and trustworthy people, we create an environment where we can grow, thrive, and fulfill God's calling. By seeking His wisdom, we can avoid unnecessary pain and build relationships that honor Him and bring joy to our lives.